The James Show Podcast.
And whether you agree with me all the time or not, I know you don't always agree with me. You got to admit, I say things on this show that you're not hearing on other shows. Have you ever heard another talk show host say, hey, maybe when we're getting all these crime statistics, we should collect other pieces of the data, not just like their weight and their height and their race and their gender or whatever the heck, or their zip code. How about we ask some actual cultural questions? Were you raised in a two-parent household? Were you raised by a biological mom or dad? Were you born out of wedlock? Did you have a step-parent in the house? Did you go to church on Sunday? Wouldn't it be great to have some of that information? Because a lot of people, myself included, think that the real underpinning, not the symptom, but the disease behind the epidemic of crime is a cultural issue, not even an economic issue. So if we had the answers to some of these questions, wouldn't that be great? Because we could say, hey, it looks like X amount of crime is committed by people who were just in church the previous Sunday. Maybe one of the solutions is we could encourage people to go to church, or we could encourage people to have kids in wedlock or be raised by their biological parents. Maybe we could discourage divorce. Maybe we should just be a little more picky about who we procreate with. 800-288-9227. A little sensitive subjects there, huh? John in Dallas, you're on WBAP.
Okay, yes, James. I just have 3 comments or 3 suggestions that I believe would help the situation in downtown Dallas.
Well, I'd love to hear it, John. Go.
Okay, great. Well, one of them would be the bars, the nightclubs, and all that need to have a 12 o'clock license instead of a 2 o'clock license.
Already disagree, but go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing, curfew for the 16 and under, the minors. They need to have a curfew. They don't need to be running the streets at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, 12 o'clock. 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock, they got to go. Homeless people, if you can't prove you're a resident, you can't prove you live downtown, you got to go in the shelter, 10 o'clock. I mean,
I'm guessing you're not a libertarian, because everything you just proposed is more restrictions for the people and more power for government.
Well, it has to do with keeping the streets safe and people, being encouraged to move in that area, in the downtown area, and they're not right now. So that's a lot of the problems. I'm just saying I don't have all the answers, but that just seems like, we don't have enough of maybe enforcement in sensible.
I feel you, but here's where I would start on my pushback against you, John, because you sound like a reasonable guy. Because my problem or my solutions are trying to deal with the root causes here. And I know you're just trying to deal with the situation we've got. Now, if you just restrict the bars to 12 o'clock, you're not getting rid of any criminals. You're just moving them somewhere else. In fact, you're making their little window of operation move, and that's about it. So I'm not sure.
We're just talking about the downtown area. And if we can move them away from there.
Agreed. So if you think crime follows the closing time of bars, then wouldn't you just relocate crime to adjacent neighborhoods or maybe even further out into the suburbs?
Well, that's probably true, but we weren't talking about that. We were talking about downtown Dallas. And also, let me just say this.
Sure.
Closing bars at 12 o'clock instead of 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes they linger on until 4 and 5. That 75 highway headed north to Sherman is very dangerous. And I think you could eliminate a lot of that problem. And a lot of people agree with me on that.
Yeah, see,
as far as the minors and the youngsters,
I don't, but let me explain why. Because if you have a closing time, then all the drunk people get on the street at the same time and they hit 75 to go north. Also, I have lived in New Orleans where there wasn't a closing time. You can sell beer in New Orleans, or you can have a bar open and sell alcohol 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, if you get the right license. Yeah. And a lot of places do. So that kind of spreads it out. So sometimes...
Yeah. And we're all just too liberal, I think, because a lot of people in the area of Deep Ellum and that whole downtown area, not so much West End because that's a dying deal there.
Dead, but, yes.
In the other areas, even in West Village. Your bartenders, nobody cares. Everybody's over-serving everybody.
Agreed.
They don't care. Everybody wants the quick money. They don't care if you get drunk and get out on the road and kill somebody.
Agreed.
And, people have that lackadaisical attitude, and it's just the way it is. But anyway, James, I'll let you go. I appreciate it.
No, it's a fun chat. I appreciate it because, I'm sure a lot of people are thinking that. But I've also, I've also had the ugly knowledge that a lot of other Dallasites have, that when the bars close, there are places you can go and keep the party going, and they will still serve alcohol, but it's illegal. Oh my goodness, there's James, are you mean to tell me that there are people who would still drink alcohol after closing time? You mean they don't all just follow the law like good little soldiers and quit? Yeah, you've just created a whole underground market. There's a string of speakeasies, and I'm not going to tell you where some of them are at, but you could find them on your phone in about 30 seconds if you really put in the effort. So just driving it underground makes it even more seedy and less accountable and bigger problems. But I'm still looking at getting rid of the criminals. Like, how do we stop creating so damn many criminals? In fact, why do some societies create more criminals than others? 800-288-9227. Coming up next, let's address this WNBA t-shirt. You need to pay us what you owe us, because by my math, if you were getting paid what you owed as a WNBA player, you'd be getting a negative check. You would have to pay dues in order to participate in the league. So is that what they mean? I know you caught the WNBA All-Star game because you're such a huge fan, right? All right, let's get that out of the way because we have a real economic discussion here. It's come up again. The idea of their pay being a little behind what they think it is. And that's not conjecture. They came out of the tunnel, and when it was time for WNBA All-Star Game warm-ups, they're wearing a shirt that says, "Pay us what you owe us." Oh, great. I am so glad y'all brought this up. Pay us what you owe us. Okay, so what are you owed as a player in a league that lost $40 million last year? What is your fair share of a $40 million loss? If you were getting paid your fair share, we would just divvy that up between the 100 or so players that you got, and y'all would all owe the league, what, $40,000? That's your negative $40,000. A $40,000 bill is what you are owed. But no, that's a little too harsh, because that's not in reality. It's not just, the net profits of the business divided by the employees. But when you want to talk about just ethereal concepts and what is just and what is fair, that could be a good argument. But economically speaking, that doesn't satiate my economic leanings, because the real worth of what they do is whatever money, whatever revenue they can draw from the free market without coercion. And so they do actually have a couple of other avenues. Having a WNBA is not something that the NBA does out of altruism. The NBA is who covers that $40 million cost. So what you have is this one league, incredibly successful, generates a ton of money, even more so than they pay their players, operate at a profit. And so for a side project, they have started this WNBA league, and they think, well, $40 million, that's worth it to have a WNBA league. So why does the NBA do this? What do they get out of this? 100% PR, baby. 100. That's what they are. Luckily, the NBA needs PR so badly, they're willing to float your league for $40 million. And look, you don't have to be a basketball fan to have heard some of the stories. Some of these guys are not the best fathers and husbands in town. Some of these guys are pretty abusive to women. Some of them are domestic violence. Some of them say terrible things. Some of them just run around treating women like donors and receptacles for their future children. Their army of bastards. A lot of ugly stuff happens, and it's not necessarily even the NBA's fault. But it doesn't matter how much trouble they run afoul with the traditional mores of feminism and people demanding respect to women. They have this whole WNBA that has the strongest women voices, some of the best known, that will never throw their daggers at the NBA because their livelihood depends on it. But on a more positive note, they are generating a lot of revenue that I think that they earn. When Caitlin Clark signs an 8-year deal with Nike last year for $28 million. Nike might lose a little bit of money on that deal, but for them, it's worth the PR. Now Nike can get away with it. Is Caitlin Clark going to have any complaints about Nike sweatshops in Indonesia, or their terrible working conditions, or their child slave labor in the jungles of Malaysia to put together some black Air Force Ones? Less likely, isn't it? So they're paying for something, but what they're paying for is political fealty, in my view. Caitlin Clark's salary is $78,000 a year. I've looked at the paperwork on who watches or who listens to this show. You make more than she does in her salary. But she has a $28 million contract with Nike over 8 years. She has a multi-million-dollar deal with Gatorade. She has a multi-million-dollar deal with State Farm, where she pops up at commercials and whatnot. So when you say, all right, well, what's fair? Fair is when you take all the revenue that the WNBA generates and you divvy it up among the players, well, then we should all be getting more money. Well, if you add in Caitlin Clark's money and you add in Paige Becker's and Angel Reese, and that's all of the players that I know, actually. Isn't there another one? I don't know. For some reason, my dad has started watching the WNBA and he sends me video highlights and stuff. It's like, Dad, these girls can't even dunk. But if you wanted to take in all the money that these girls bring in endorsements from corporate sponsors, evil corporations, evil capitalist pigs who just exploit people. No, they're not so bad. Actually, the WNBA wouldn't be considered a money loser. Then you could actually make the case that you cover your own salary. But you know what you have to do? Caitlin Clark would have to share all that Nike money with everybody else. She would have to share all that State Farm money with everyone else. She'd have to share all that Gatorade money with everyone else. There was Angel Reese. She was on what was it, Christian Dior or Prada or I don't know. There was a billboard out here on the American Airlines Center that she was in for some luxury clothing brand. Does she really believe in equity, equality, and fairness so much that she's taking those big millions of dollars that she's making through her endorsements and sharing it with the other players? Oh, no? Oh, that's weird because that's what fair would be. That's, you do have some players out there who are making $42,000 a year and they're driving around in a car even older than mine. Just for bragging rights here. Don't get jealous. I have a 10-year-old Toyota with body damage. So, ladies, calm down. I get it. I'm not real financially successful either. But the point is there's a nice duality that's going on that's real obvious here. Pay us what you owe us. We generate all this money and we don't get to see it all. And we don't all get an equal share of it. Well, the last person wearing those shirts should be any of these ladies to get $1 million deals. Because not only are you not being underpaid, you are in what is a gift, a league of benevolence only. You are not playing basketball professionally based on the merits of your own ability. You're playing basketball based on the merits of the politics that comes with supporting a women's league and the people that are buying off the criticism of their otherwise bad behavior by supporting your players in your league. So now Nike can go along and they've bought off some of the loudest critics, some of the most political critics as well. And with their sweatshops, with their child labor practices, with everything negative that they do, it's totally worth it to throw a few bucks at these girls. And so they won't talk bad about Nike. But that's the league you're in. That's the business you're in. It's not basketball. And look, I don't buy the idea either that, women don't deserve as much as the men because if they lined up against the men would crush them. Yes, they would. Absolutely. Same argument that I love for the two soccer teams. The National Women's Soccer Team says we should be paid as much as the men. Well, really? Line up on the field against them. Let me see how that works out for you. But there are arenas in women's sports where women do make more money than men, or the gap isn't nearly as wide. Think like women's tennis, women's volleyball, women's gymnastics. But why? Well, because you, the consumers out there, actually watch it in similar proportion to the men. Not so with the WNBA. Here's Caitlin Clark talking about her pay sponsors.
Where does your W salary stack up against your deals with State Farm, Gatorade, Nike?
It's a good question.
It's a great question.
Honestly, I feel like that's where we're really fortunate is that we have those other deals. And I think that's one of the things that we're in the room fighting for, like Fee said, is, we should be paid more. And hopefully that's the case moving forward as the league continues to grow. I think that's something that's probably the most important thing that we're in the room advocating about.
Yeah, that's what someone in the top 1% would say. Is it the same group of people that talk about how it's not fair, how there's just a handful of billionaires that have more money than the bottom 50% of the entire population? Well, I believe the top 10% of the players in the WNBA definitely make more money than the bottom 50%. Where's your wealth redistribution here? Well, you have a microcosm of an economy here. Why aren't you saying that? Why don't we take money away from you who earn more and redistribute that, share the wealth with the people who earn less until everybody's equal? Because that's what you ask the rest of the world to do, but not your world. Interesting. Is this Steve, the big, bad black conservative on the James Show?
You know it is.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't heard from you in a while. How's it going? Your thoughts on the WNBA players saying they deserve more money?
Well, work's been doing a lot more talking to customers and being able to talk on the radio. So, unfortunately, I haven't been able to call into the show.
That's a good problem.
Yeah, it's a very good problem to have. But I've got 3 points, and I'm hoping I can get through at least 2 of them.
Sure.
But the first thing I've got is, who printed the shirts? I mean, they've got to know that the league is in the red. So you've got players.
Did they charge it to the league? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you got owners. You got whoever the ball boys and girls are. Nobody said, wait a minute, guys. Wait. We owe the league $40 million before we're even. Who thought it was a good idea to print these daggum shirts and wear them outside? I think it goes back to the idea that women live life on easy mode. That's going to piss off a lot of your listeners, and I'm sorry.
Oh, no. Say that again and just say it slow so everyone hears it.
I think that it really just digs back into the understanding that women really do honestly live life on easy mode. They don't even have to consider the math. The fact that they're $40 million in debt makes no difference at all. They think that they should get double, triple, quadruple the salary, and nobody should ask any questions. And, even without the Caitlins and the Angel, what's her face?
Angel Reese.
And the other girl, I didn't even know who she was. So I was shocked to even hear. I said, who? The who? Paige, somebody or another? I'd never even heard of her. It tells you how unimportant these people are in the grand scheme of things. I don't see how they can come to that conclusion sensibly. Now, the second point, let me go back to it. There it is. The fact that your pops is watching the WNBA is exactly what the WNBA wants. So their audience grew by 1, at least. So that means maybe next year they won't be $40 million in debt, maybe $39.99 million. So it won't be it's such a loss. They'll be okay. If they keep that track, they'll be in the black. I don't know, maybe 50 years from now.
Well, okay. So here's my theory on my dad. I don't think he actually watches the game. I think he just watches so much news and so much social media that he kind of gets the feeling like the WNBA is far more popular than it is. And so when he sees like some of the bickering or the stories that they try and make going back and forth, like, oh, look at this flagrant foul, or look, they got in a fight, or someone tried to throw a punch or whatever, and he's like, people are really watching this. I'm like, no, I don't think they are, Dad. But did you have another point to get to? Because I love that.
Yeah. Last one, and I'll leave you alone. But when you started the story, I think I heard you say All-Star Game. Did you say All-Star Game?
Yeah, their All-Star Game was this weekend, and this was for the warm-ups of the All-Star Game when they came out in the shirts, pay us what you owe us.
Yeah. Well, obviously I didn't watch it either, but I guess the first question is, what do you have to do to be an All-Star in the WNBA? I mean, they all score like 6 points. Anyway, I mean, what do you have to do? And how many players were All-Stars? I mean, like you said, you named 3, and I didn't know but 2 of them. So who are the rest of these people calling themselves stars to deserve to be on an All-Star team?
Look, no matter how bad a league is, there's going to be 10 people who are less bad than everyone else, or they're going to be the best of the league. So the point isn't even here to dunk on them, pun sort of intended here, because, I hope they have a nice league. I wish it did turn a profit. I don't wish them harm. I like the idea that if my girls were in the basketball, they would have someone to look up to that's also a woman. Right. But here's something that, just to admit my own ignorance here, it was only about a month ago before I even watched half of a WNBA game. I'd seen highlights and whatever reels people put together. And I was at a Chinese buffet, and I happened to be sitting at the table facing a TV, and it was right behind my kids. And so I actually was watching it, and I watched maybe 30 minutes of it. Steve, it was terrible. It was bad. Like, it was.
It did nothing for you.
Well, it not only did it not do anything for me, I was thinking, all right, my high school team of Bug Tussle would destroy these ladies. But again, not just that either. Like, I think, and this might sound like a stretch, I promise I'm not being hyperbolic just for comedy's sake. I think the JV team at Bug Tussle would blow these girls out of the gym too. And again, I don't delight in saying that, but like, none of them can dunk. There's a bunch of bounce passes and layups. It looked kind of like, I don't know, like the Washington Generals would beat the snot out of them. But yeah. That was kind of my takeaway. And again, I don't wish them any harm. I wish it did make money. So it wouldn't have to be this big economic discussion, and I would like to come in here and say maybe they do deserve more money. Look, it's not the world's greatest basketball, but they got eyeballs, they got fans, they're selling jerseys, they're selling tickets, they're getting ratings. But here it's just a big welfare program.
But and then, like I said, the biggest thing to me, and that's why I started with that point, who printed the shirts? Who didn't know that there were $40 million a day?
I think they all know. I think
they
know.
Immediately.
All right, we're going to leave you with the great Dave Chappelle.
Say LeBron James changed his gender. You know what I mean? Okay, can he stay in the NBA, or because he's a woman, does he have to go to the WNBA, where he will score 840 points a game? What does it actually mean to be equal? You know what I mean? Like, women are actually equal to men, then there would be no WNBA, would there? You would just be good enough to play in the NBA with us. Or, here's another idea that's going to be very controversial. You could shut the up.
All right, that's the Philosopher King, Dave Chappelle. Coming up next on The James Show, my next guest returning to the show, Javier Perez. He's a legal expert, and I needed to talk to a legal expert here because something doesn't sound right. We all saw the funny video of the couple on the Kiss Cam at the Coldplay concert. Apparently, they weren't supposed to be together. It's the CEO of Astronomer and his head of HR, and they were both married, and they both acted ashamed that this was possibly happening. And then someone threw up a link here that said, a third of U.S. employees have had a workplace romance with their manager. It doesn't mean like right now, today, but it means it's sometime in their career. I haven't. Am I just ugly, Javier? I didn't know it was this common.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I don't think that's what it is. I think it's a function more of, working in close quarters and working with someone, for an extended period of time that, inevitably in some cases will result in a romance like that.
Well, thank you for confirming that I'm not ugly, but isn't this a really horrible idea? You mean 1 out of 3 people do this?
Well, if we're talking about, just meeting somebody at work, it's not exactly surprising, at least not to me. But we're talking about kind of extramarital stuff as we saw in the infamous video you were describing. Yeah, I mean, I think it is concerning. I think it kind of fuels the fire of people being suspicious of their spouse that, gets close to somebody at work. Okay.
Well, look, 80% of American workers said they had a workplace romance, period, point blank, of in the story. And look, I did that. It doesn't count when I was waiting tables at restaurants in college and whatnot. But I did at the first radio station I worked with. I was just the lowest of the low producer underling, and I dated a girl in the promotions department. And when that happened, I had my boss pull me aside. He's like, look, she's a nice girl, and it's probably not going to cause you any problems, but you should never, ever, ever do this again. That is the dumbest thing you could possibly do, because in the off chance that when it does inevitably end, unless you're going to marry her, that if she wants to destroy you over that or hurt you in some way, she can end your job, if not your career. So I was cautious, and this was when I was 25, and so I haven't really touched it since.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is some real concern there. That's why a lot of employers will require you to disclose a romance at work, is for that risk right there, that what was consensual can all of a sudden appear not to be. And when you're that close to somebody, you got a lot of dirt on them, right? I think the other thing to remember, though, is the power dynamic between a supervisor and a subordinate can kind of bring up some other legal issues, one of which is does the subordinate really have the power to say no? And that's kind of where the legal safeguards come into play. But, we start flirting with that line, no pun intended, you can get into problems.
Well, and I think it's a bigger problem for the men over the women. For what I've observed, there are a lot of people that I've worked with who did not follow that rule. And it's never ended with a guy getting a payout. It has ended several times with a woman getting a payout. So I think this is just doubly dumb if you're a man.
That may bear out kind of statistically. I think sort of sexual harassment complaints and that sort of thing statistically come more from women than men. But it does happen. I had a couple of those cases myself. And it really comes down to kind of the power dynamic and the economic piece, right? That's the person that decides whether you get a bonus. That's the person that decides whether you keep your job. So a lot of risk, like you said, that is a very perilous thing to do.
So what happens if you're rolled up in one of these relationships that goes sour? How do you protect yourself?
I always come back to documentation is kind of the most important thing. If it's, you break up with your boss, and they start having problems, I think you got to, document that and kind of use some discretion on how far you want to take it. But always kind of have that in your back pocket. Like, look, we broke up. I don't like the way that you're treating me since, we had this personal relationship and, we need to keep work separate. Always kind of assume that whatever you write down is going to be read someday in a deposition, like we say.
Oh my goodness, right?
Just assume there's going to be somebody looking at it and make sure you word it the way you would want it to be read.
Interesting stuff. Javier Perez, thanks for coming on the James Show. How do they find your work outside of WBAP, sir?
You can find us at javierperezlaw.com.
Thank you very much. And look, Garrett, I know you don't have the women crawling all over you, but you need to follow this rule too, okay? He's a handsome fella over there.
The James Show Podcast.